This is the very first of the CGR interview series, and it's my pleasure to speak with Tommy Tallarico, the founder of Video Games Live. Thank you so much for joining us. As an avid classic gamer and fan of music, I'm very pleased to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show.
How do you describe it to people? It's not a video game orchestra.
Yeah, it's a show. It's a live event. Well, of course, I like to describe Video Games Live. Well, it's all the greatest video game music played by a full symphony and choir. But what makes it really special and unique is that everything is completely synchronized to massive video screens and rock and roll lighting and special effects and a stage show production and interactive elements with the crowd. So I kind of like to describe Video Games Live as having all the power and emotion of a symphony orchestra, but combined with the energy and excitement of a rock concert, mixed together with all the cutting-edge visuals and technology and interactivity and fun that video games provide. So, I mean, the reason I created Video Games Live is I wanted to prove to the world how culturally significant and artistic video games have become. So I wanted to create a show for everybody, not just a show where there's a symphony on stage and everybody's in tuxedos and they play video game music. There's so much more involved in an actual video game itself. A video game itself is not just the music, but it's the graphics and the visuals. It's the storyline. It's the characters. It's the fun factor. And it's the interactivity. So I wanted to bring all of those things because I consider Video Games Live like a complete celebration of the entire video game industry. And that's not to say that a symphony in tuxedo who plays video game music is bad. No, in fact, I encourage that. I love that. It just moves us up higher, everything, the whole industry up higher on the ladder. But Video Games Live isn't just that. It's so much more than that. The music is a big element of it, but it's certainly not the whole thing.
Well, I've seen the show twice in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
I think you've said you enjoyed playing with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra.
Well, I mean, I'm not just saying this because, I'm talking to you, but anyway, you can look this up on the internet. I mean, anyone will tell you that, the Pittsburgh Symphony, which has been around for over 100 years, is one of the finest symphonies, not only in the country, but in the entire world. I mean, it really is. It's one of the top ones in the U.S. for sure. And it's interesting, actually, when I go on the show and they set us up backstage and everything, and I kind of got my dressing room and everything backstage, and they put me in the conductor's suite or whatever, and there's a there's a picture on the wall of Richard Strauss conducting the Pittsburgh Symphony back in like 1892 or something like that. So it's like, for those who don't know, Richard Strauss is like this very famous classical, composer and musician and conductor. So it's when you see like such, history on the wall like that, and it's so cool for us. And again, that was the goal of the show. Is here we are with a Pittsburgh Symphony. And, normally they're playing Stravinsky and Mozart, Beethoven and Bach, but tonight they're going to play Chrono Cross and Mario and Zelda and Final Fantasy and Halo and Warcraft, and it's quite the experience, especially when you go into, when you go, now the Pittsburgh Symphony, we've played with them like 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 different shows. But when you first walk into a place like that, it's funny because these are classical musicians who've been trained their whole life on, the masters and everything, and so, it's funny when they kind of sit down for the first time, they sit in their chair and, when we put the music on the stands and they're kind of paging through and they're like, Sonic the Hedgehog, it's World of Warcraft, this isn't Mahler. What is this,
Well, they all look very proper, but then they just explode with the intensity of the games, like you said.
Well, what it is too, it's not just the games though, it's the audience and the crowd themselves. Look, they're musicians on the stage, like they're like any other musicians in the world. They feed off of the energy of the crowd, and a lot of classical musicians don't get to experience that high level of energy and excitement from a crowd, because most, for whatever reason, symphony music over the years is then classical music has turned into, shh, shh, everybody be quiet.
It's
Shh.
very proper.
It's proper. It's rude for you to clap. And I gotta say, that's total bullshit. I mean, it really is. I don't care, what tradition it is. Look, Beethoven and Mozart, those guys were the rock stars of their time, and you read Beethoven's, diaries and things like that, and you'll see that some of his greatest moments came when he was conducting, and the audience could no longer contain themselves, and they started to cheer and holler out during a performance. So there's stuff like that where, it's become set in stone that everybody's got to be quiet at a symphony, and we totally blow that out of the water.
Oh, absolutely.
The first thing we do when we get on stage is we get the audience to, and I tell them when I come on stage, look, it's okay if there's something that you see or hear, it's okay to holler out. And like you said, it makes the performance better, not only from the crowd standpoint, but from the performance standpoint, and we get so many classical musicians who start out in the day, like I said, maybe a little apprehensive, like, what is this stuff? And then once they play the music together for the first time during our rehearsals, you can see them looking around, nodding their heads, going, wow, this is legitimate music. This is really amazing music. But then, like you said, when the show happens and 2,000-3,000 people are screaming and cheering and yelling like it's the second coming of Elvis Presley or the Beatles, that's when they really start to get into it, and you see the big smiles on the face. So by the intermission, I have musicians coming up to me going, I've been playing the oboe for 40 years, and I've never heard an audience like this before. And to have it be young people who never come and see us, my gosh, this is the greatest night, in my performing career. When are you guys coming back? So they really do, it really does make a difference to kind of have that, again, if you're looking for a show where everybody's going to be quiet and that's not what we are, video games are fun. And I want our show to be fun.
Well, I've described it to people, and I recommend it to everybody. You really should see Video Games Live as a combination rock concert and symphony, because it's not quite as rude as a rock concert, but it's not as proper as a symphony. It's the perfect mixture, and it helps that half your audience is dressed like Mario and Zelda. Anyway,
well, that's the thing.
I couldn't count the number of links that were sitting around me, and when you guys play the themes that, like what I would consider the really memorable ones, like Ocarina of Time. The theme from Halo with the choir was just mind-blowing. Sonic the Hedgehog. Of course, Super Mario Brothers Outrun. Definitely, I've got some games to recommend to you later for some more music.
We always want.
But you started the show off, or at least the two that I saw, with Pong. Just like one instrument with the ball going back and forth in the background. And then you'd have people up on stage playing Human Space Invaders. As well as a Guitar Hero contest, followed by this just beautiful music. And I wanted to ask you how you selected the songs that you bring with the tour, that you play in the tour.
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things one of the hardest challenges. I don't want to say it's the hardest thing to do because it's all fun and great, but one of the biggest challenges that I have is creating a set list, especially at this point in our in the tour's life.
And you've been around for a decade now, right? This has been...
We've been touring for over 7 years, but we started the company back in 2002, so it's our 10-year anniversary this year. But over that 10 years now, I've created over 90 segments for the show, and a 2.5-hour performance means we can play about 18 segments, 17 or 18 segments. And so now, I mean, there's so much great music out there. So normally when we go to a city for a very first time, we'll play, like you said, the classic arcade medley, which you talked about, where we start with Pong in 1972 and go all the way up to Tetris in 1986 and play 25 snippets of games from the arcade in chronological order all the way up. So, we usually start off with that. But we'll play the favorites, the Mario, Zelda, Warcraft, Halo, Metal Gear Solid, Kingdom Hearts, things like that, the Castlevania. And then, that's kind of like the first round. But then when we come back, we completely change the show. Whenever we come back to a city, we've never played the same show twice, in fact. So when we come back to the city, then maybe we'll get into things like, Street Fighter 2 or Shadow of the Colossus or
I saw that one.
Or Assassin's Creed. And I mean, there's so many amazing music out there. And then, we talk about something like Zelda, for example. We have 4 different Zelda segments. So, we might come back and play something right now where we kind of did a whole 25th anniversary medley of all the greatest Zelda music with the orchestra. And we have Laura Intravia, who's also known as Flute Link on the internet. So she's playing the flute along the orchestra, and so there's a ton of different things. Mario, we have 4 or 5 Mario segments. Warcraft or Blizzard segments, we probably have about 10 of them. And so there's so many different. We have 4 different Halo segments. So even the games that are popular, we will still change. But I like to get into stuff that really surprises people. I like to throw in 2 or 3 per show that people weren't expecting. Something like a Mega Man or Metroid or Beyond Good and Evil, Shadow of the Colossus, Uncharted, Red Dead Redemption. Something that people think that they probably wouldn't see during the show. But I can tell you, that especially the hardcore fans, when something like a Shadow of the Colossus comes up on screen, people lose their mind because they're like, oh my God, I would have never thought that this is, and I love this music and I love this game. People who've played Shadow of the Colossus know what I'm talking about. And so there's always that kind of element of surprise that I always want to keep going. And even like you said with Guitar Hero, we have 3 different Guitar Hero segments. We do Aerosmith, we do Van Halen, but recently we've been doing the Foo Fighters, the Pretender from the Foo Fighters. And that's just energy, really to the wall kind of stuff. So anyway, so I have a huge spreadsheet of every single show. We've done hundreds of shows now, and it has every single segment that we've played at every single show. So when we come back to Pittsburgh, for example, I then look at all the shows we've done in Pittsburgh, and then I start to craft together a set list, because you got to keep some of the classics, because the interesting thing about Video Games Live is word of mouth spreads so much. Like you mentioned, you tell your friends about it, and they tell their friends, kind of thing. Every time we play a show, about 50% of the audience have never seen the show before, right? So I can't just come in with all obscure new material. You always have to, people want to see Zelda, Mario, Warcraft, Final Fantasy. We got a couple 3 or 4 different Final Fantasy segments as well. So that you want to see all that stuff. So but we always change it up. It's always different, and that's it's I say it's the challenging part, but it's also the fun part as well.